The transgender community not only faces higher rates of incarceration, but also higher rates of abuse once they enter the prison system. Shaheen Pasha of the Prison Journalism Project and Lisa Strawn, a trans activist recently released from San Quentin, join me now to talk about it all. So, Lisa, you transitioned as a teenager just before you entered the prison system back in the 80s. So how did you see the treatment and acceptance of trans and LGBTQ people change during the 25 years you were in prison?
For me, I really don't think that there's any difference between now and then. It's all the same, and it's not necessarily how you carry yourself or what you get into or what you don't get into. It's because there are so many people that don't like trans people, don't like gay people, don't like Black people. It varies, and it's a difficult life. Believe me, and living in a man's prison, it's very difficult. Up until 4 years ago, in Department of Corrections, CDCR, we had no gender affirming clothes or cosmetics or anything like that. And because two trans women, they through the Department of Corrections, we were really able to actually identify as who we are. And I think that that's only right, because even though you're in a man's prison, doesn't mean I'm going to act like a man, and I'm not going to change who I am in order to fit in. So I'm still going to be female in a man's prison. And a lot of people were really furious when this took place, when we were getting the clothing. I mean, people were like, well, why do you guys get this? And I'm like, well, if you guys stuck together, you probably have more things too. Stop bitching about things, about what we have. Trans women were raped, attacked, victimized in order to get the things that they have now in prison. It wasn't just like they woke up one day, well, this is what I'm going to take on. No, they went through hell, and they're still going through that in these prisons. They still are.
If I can just add to that, just kind of with what I've been hearing from our writers across the country, the situation in the sense of they're saying there's more external sort of acceptance or more talk about it maybe now as opposed to before, but internally those phobias and those kinds of that violence continues to plague the community inside. I mean, people, they may even get gender affirming clothes or, be able to get makeup or these types of things, but that doesn't stop the abuse that they continue to receive both verbally and physically. It's in some ways, some our writers have told us that it's almost like a Band-Aid to kind of appease society and say we're moving with the times. Look, we're following some of the restrictions in PREA, we're doing the things we're supposed to by the letter of the law. But in terms of the mentality, there's still a long way to go in terms of the acceptance or the understanding and even the ability to identify.
Transgender Day of Remembrance. Perfect example. That was forced on San Quentin from the department, from headquarters. And so they basically made them do Transgender Day of Remembrance, because once they knew Sandra Weiner was coming, everybody was on board. It was like, this is going to be a dog and pony show. So it didn't really change. It didn't change much. Next day, everybody went back to business. And that's what happens. You can make a stink about something. We'll deal with it. And then they'll deal with it in their own way, their own manner. And then they just move on to the next thing. So there's really not an answer for anything.
A 2015 survey found transgender people were 10 times more likely than the general prison population to be sexually assaulted by other inmates. And across the country, trans women are housed inside men's prisons. So talk about how dangerous this can be for trans people inside.
I mean, I've had many things happen to me. I've been raped in prison, in a physical altercation with someone, beaten up just because they didn't like who I was. And it happens. It continues to happen. It's not going to stop happening.
Who you live with, who you're in a cell with is a big thing. I mean, it's a safety thing, because at any given time, they can put somebody in your cell that is unaccepting and has already demonstrated their willingness in the past to severely injure or kill someone, to show that I'm not going to cell with that person. They could put somebody like that in my cell at any given time, and I could be in a fight for my life. You know, so you have to continually be proactive.
How equipped are prisons to support trans people, from giving hormones to the attitudes of correctional officers?
And the attitudes with the staff is probably the hardest thing to deal with at times. I can't really say there's never been a prison that I've been to that I've never had issues with staff, just because of who I am. I don't necessarily have to do anything, or a trans person doesn't have to do anything. It's just staff. It's oh my God, this is just an ongoing issue. That's something that's never going to stop. It's never going to stop.
There were 3 of us who were transgender. Again, they took us in for a strip search, and it was pretty horrific. We ended up filing a complaint. I've written to quit everything else because we ended up with no fewer than 7 or 8 staff members standing there watching 3 trans women get undressed. And, you know, I was so mortified by that, you know, I truly felt the only thing that was missing was they weren't throwing dollar bills at us.
When you're a woman and you're consistently being called by your dead name and being consistently called by a name that you do not identify with anymore, that a lot of the people I talked to have also said that is also extremely damaging, where you just feel like how you see yourself, the way you're being called is not being honored. It's even, you know, the amount of paperwork and lawsuits people have to go through to just even get their names changed. And then even if their names are changed on an ID, it's like their dead name is still very up in front and center. And then maybe they'll put something at the bottom, maybe, right, to kind of appease you. And that in and of itself is also, because identity is so important to every human being, especially to people inside who in many cases have been forgotten. Your identity is everything. So when your name is not even being honored, it's like another blow that kind of comes with incarceration.
I've seen so many trans women who are just beginning to transition in prison, and that is extremely hard. I wouldn't even want that in my life. That is so difficult, because finding out who you are and trying to identify as that, and then you have all this extra stuff on you with the police or other incarcerated people. It is extremely a lot to deal with. It's a lot to deal with.
There's also none of that mental health support that you need in that process, because when you are going through gender affirming treatment, I mean, there are hormones involved that also mess with your head.
Look, to put it mildly, I was going through male menopause and female puberty all at the same time. I was a little psychotic, okay? I was very argumentative. I knew everything. You couldn't tell me anything, and then the next minute I'm crying over in the corner, you know, and they had no clue. They gave me no counseling, no support, no nothing as to how to deal with this. It was just, it'll pass.
Mental health is a problem anyway behind bars, but when you add this, once again, another layer to it, where they're not given that kind of support, it can be very, very damaging on the psyche as you're trying to readjust into this new norm, into who you are in a world that doesn't accept you and is not giving you the support you need to kind of grow into who you are.
A new California law went into effect January 1st, and that allows incarcerated trans people to be housed by their identity. Do you think that will make a big difference for the safety and happiness of trans people?
The Senate bill, oh my goodness. I've read it over and over and over. I read this bill so many times. I agree with how the bill was written, because I was a part of it. The Transgender Justice Project was a moving force in it. The Trans Latina Coalition was a moving force in it. And of course, Senator Weiner, he was a big part of it. But I think there should have been a lot more to ensure some kind of safety precautions, and the fine tuning of, well, this person identifies as cis, so why does this person get to go there and this person doesn't? And I don't know. It's still a lot of it is confusing for me, because I don't understand that.
Oh my gosh, that would be so lovely to move to a women's prison. Do you know how much I would love to sit in a chair? You know, at the women's prison they have, what do you call it, beauty college. And to have my hair done correctly and by someone trained, oh my God, that would be so wonderful.
We've spoken to people that have said, you know, they do wind up getting transferred to a women's prison, and they're more at ease and more comfortable with that from that perspective. But there are still assaults, and there's still phobia, and there's still abuse, and you know, other women are still scared, or you know, that a person coming in may try to, you know, be there on some sort of like fake, it might be fake, and just to attack them. So there's a lot of fear even within the women's prison. So this is basically a situation where you're afraid in the man's prison, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a magic utopia the second you wind up in the women's prison. You have a whole other level of trying to fit in and trying to avoid abuse and assault there as well, from people who don't accept you and say that you're not a woman, you don't belong here. That is traumatizing too.
So does the physical abuse stop in women's prisons?
You're still marginalized, right? Like you're a marginalized community within a marginalized community within a marginalized community as a trans woman inside a women's prison. Abuse still happens, assault still happens, sexual assault still happens. I mean, there's a lot of violence in there, and it's because you're different. You're an outsider in both cases, in many of these places. So it's not a cure-all, I guess would be the best. It's not a solution for everything that's happening. It really does come down to the way society views the trans community, and that is going to be just exacerbated inside these types of facilities where rights are taken away and people are marginalized by definition. It kind of becomes a hierarchy of marginalization in some ways.
So what are some solutions to all of the problems trans people face in prison?
It has gotten a little better as far as the trans movement, only because trans people are suing. They're taking a stand, and they're suing the Department of Corrections. There were girls at San Quentin. I mean, and I praise them because everything they didn't like, they were writing a 602. There was one girl, I mean, if you threw something on the ground, she was gonna write it up. And I like that because it's something that's needed. And we don't have a lot of people who are going to speak out and who are going to do things because they're scared. And I would see a lot of retaliation as far as staff when you attempt making noise about things. It's just really difficult. It's just so difficult no matter where you are, because you're truly not going to be accepted by everybody. You may be accepted by some, but you just got to learn to kick in doors. You got to kick them doors in.